So I'll do a quick introduction of the panelists. The idea is to leave as much room open as possible for discussion and questions. So allow me to start immediately. To my left is Catherine Béroubet. She's the CEO of Cycle Central and Vice President of Sustainable Development, Investor Relations, and Public Affairs at Cycle Momentum and Cycle Capital, an organization working with entrepreneurs, investors, and companies to find innovative solutions to the major ecological challenges facing humanity. She handles public and government relations and is in charge of Cycle Capital's impact investment practice. She's also a mentor for the Cycle Momentum Accelerator and vice chair of Ecotech Québec, an organization that mobilizes key players in the province's clean tech industries. So that's Catherine. To her left is Professor Benoit Boulet. He's also the Associate Vice Principal of Research and Innovation at McGill and Director of the McGill Engine Centre for Technological Innovation and Entrepreneurship. From 2014 to 2020, he was the Associate Dean of Research and Innovation for the Faculty of Engineering. So, as a professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at McGill, his research areas include the design and data-driven control of electric vehicles and renewable energy systems and machine learning applied to biomedical systems. So, good to have you, Benoit. To Benoit's left is Adriana Mendez. She's the investment lead at Sustainable Development Technology Canada, an organization that works across public and private sectors to help Canadian clean technology companies get new ideas to market faster and grow firms to scale sooner. She serves as a client-facing portfolio manager throughout the life cycle of an investment with a particular focus on project finance. Her portfolio of companies currently includes agriculture tech, water, plastics circularity, and supply chains for AI and software, totaling $39 million in investments. So welcome, Adriana. And finally, at the far left of the table is Caroline Pelletier, Vice President of Investment and Screening at Anges Québec, the largest angel investor network in Canada. Drawing on her experience in entrepreneurship, marketing, and as a former angel investor herself, her role includes sourcing deals for Anges Québec members, selecting which investment opportunities will be presented to them, and preparing entrepreneurs for their first presentation to investors. So welcome, Caroline. So a very distinguished panel with a lot of different expertise. So we're going to start to sort of just set the stage for how things work here at McGill. So we'll lead off with a question for Benoit. So could you give us your feedback and approach to taking a process from moving from a breakthrough or an invention to commercialization? So maybe just walk us through what the path looks like for that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark, and I'm glad you're actually chairing this session because I'm going to resort to you if I can't remember our own rules, since we're working closely
together. There's a lot of them.
Well, you know, so essentially we're researchers, we're doing research, and but research is not only about publishing paper necessarily. You can publish a paper, yes, that's great, and that in itself has an impact, but sometimes you wish you would go further to have your research have an impact directly in society, whether it be, for example, a CleanTech process or. And so the question is, when you have this breakthrough, this invention in your lab, and you go, wow, I think there's really something there. What do you do? Well, at McGill, the first step to do is to report it and file a report of invention. So when you file a report of invention, then our office intervenes, our Office of Innovation and Partnerships looks at the ROI and, you know, basically says, all right, are you sure these are the inventors? Let's make sure that all the inventors are listed and that their contribution is recognized in that report of invention. And the report of invention summarizes essentially what the invention is and talks about the funding that might have been used for to arrive at this you know, research result that could lead to an innovation. But that's a very first step for IP protection and also reporting to the university that, hey, we've got something in the lab that is of importance, we think. Now, you know, once you do that, then there's a bunch of people in innovation that will look at it to do some sort of due diligence about, you know, is this really something new, for example? Is this novel? Or if you Google it, do you find 12 other versions of what you're saying? No, of course, it's more deeper than that, but And then there's the patent landscape, for example. Is there space for this to be pushed as an invention? Is there, if there is, at what cost and so on? Is this going to require $1 billion to develop or not? And so these are the process. It's it's much more programmed than people think, actually. We go through a process, and that process, you shouldn't be afraid of that process. That process is there for you for us in our office to help you develop your invention, okay? Because an innovation is not an innovation until it hits market. It goes into society and makes an impact. So it's still an invention until you can go to market. But there are many steps to be taken. But these are the few steps at the beginning that, and then, at that point, McGill decides to say, okay, we're going to file patents, for example, or a patent for this new technology. There could be, or the rights can be reverted back to the inventors, depending who wants to commercialize. And then comes the business opportunity, the value proposition. What is the value proposition behind that? And then we have services through our office, but also at the Engine, at the Dobson, at the CLIP, the Clinical Innovation Platform, out of the Faculty of Medicine, to help the inventors look at the value proposition. What is the market? What's the market? We can help. Definitely, we do market studies in our office as well. So at that stage, the ball is in motion, right? The ball is in motion to try to prepare what would be the next step. It's not necessarily a startup. It can be a license to a company, all right? It's not necessarily a startup play, that's what I mean. If it is, and researchers are inclined to do it that way, then we help also, and then we have the McGill spin-off designation. If the researchers wish to develop a little bit further their invention in their lab, we allow it up to, was it 1 year or 2 years?
We can go to 2 years.
2 years. It can go to 2 years where the researchers can use their lab to continue development of, let's say, a prototype to convince investors and so on. These types of activities will be regulated, of course, because now we're talking about a company, developing something in the lab. But it is, there's a frame around it right now that works well. And we have a few examples of companies developing that way. And so on. So, I could go on, but that's the crucial thing, is to report as an invention, to start the conversation, basically, and seek value into this invention.
Yeah, so thanks, Benoit. That's a great description, and you can see there's a lot of components, but they're hopefully all there to help you, as he said. And starting at the beginning with things like just making sure you actually have rights to this is really important. I'm sure some of the other people at this table have talked to cool startups from university and find out, wait, you actually don't have rights to this. There was a sponsor and it's encumbered. So now that we've heard kind of all the steps to it, there's certainly a lot. Everyone else here has some opportunity to jump into the process with the ecosystem. So my question, and we'll start, because we went the reverse way before, we'll start with Caroline. So where do each of you and your organizations fit into this process? What role do you play, and how do you work with researchers? So we'll start with Caroline.
So how do we fit into the process? I don't know if this is on, yeah? Yes, okay. So hello, everyone. So Anges Québec comes in at early stage funding, probably once the research is done and the product is finalizing development. So where we can come in at a pre-commercial stage, where perhaps there's been maybe some pilot projects with a minimum viable product, that sort of thing, some early market validation. It could even be letters of intent from potential clients and that sort of thing. So the angels will come in and invest, what we call the pre-seed stage is usually pre-market. Amounts of maybe 300 to 500,000, co-investing with maybe a group, and at that point, usually the companies are raising maybe $1 million or $2 million. So, so where we fit in, the angels, there's 250 angel investors. They're really individuals who have decided to invest their own money and to bring in some added value in terms of like maybe their networks of contacts or their experience. So they'll advise the startups, sometimes sit on the board of directors or be an official advisor, and help the company go a little bit further with the capital than if it was just the capital alone. So really what we hope to do is help those companies come to the next step in achieving their milestones. So maybe coming up to finalizing a product and being able to we pass on the baton at one point to Series A investors, but typically Anges Québec can fund a couple rounds of investment. So typically the companies come in and propose a project of for about a year and a half or 2 years of their company's life cycle, and then other investors such as Sept Capital continue the chain after.
And I think you made a great point about it. Often it's just thought of as the money, but the support, the network, all of that has a really big impact too. So I'm glad you brought that up. So Adriana, your comments on how you fit in the ecosystem?
Sure. So I work for SDTC, so Sustainable Development Technology Canada. So how do we fit in the ecosystem? So we have 3 funding streams. First funding stream is the seed fund, and then we have the startup fund, and then we have the scale-up. So in the seed fund, we work with accelerators or incubators, and they're the ones who nominate companies, or usually we want to help them on their proof of concept. So pre-startup, when they already have that idea, but they're ready to have a proof of concept, that's when we come in on that stage of funding, and we provide 50 to 100,000 grant. So it's a project of 1 year. So that's one part of the funding stream. Then we provide, we have a startup stream that we call a startup. So it's usually when you have your proof of concept and you're ready for demonstration. So I think you have a question on the value of death. So that's basically the value of death. So, if you're familiar with technology readiness level, so TRL 3, 4 to something like TRL 7, 8. So for demonstration projects, so we provide on average 1 to 3 million, and it has to be a project as well. It's a grant. So project-based, a company has to have a third-party demonstration partner. We cover 40%, up to 40% of expenses of the project, and it can be a maximum of 5 years. So that's the startup fund, and we are technology agnostic. So, like as it was mentioned, my portfolio, mine is very varied. We have any technology possible, from agriculture, soil, nuclear energy, renewable energy, all across Canada. So anything you can imagine, as long as it's a Canadian small, medium company that results in environmental and economic benefits. And so for the scale-up stream, those are really, usually it's companies that have journeyed with us in the startup stream, and that they're ready to really scale up. They are looking for a project where they really want to roll out their technology, and it's already in the demonstration stage, but they really need like a real big push to really commercialize their technology. So that's when we can provide $10 to $20 million on a project. So these are, we only do like 2 or 3 per year, but those are really like our star companies that are really ready to launch their technology.
Great, thanks very much. So, Catherine, over to you.
Yes, and so right after both Caroline and Adriana, so Psycho Capital, we are 2 things. So first of all, we're a VC. So for the ones that are familiar, we're growth stage VC. We have 6 funds, 600 million under management. We're investing now. We've had a number of early stage funds in the past, but right now we're focusing on growth stage. So we're coming in at Series B once the company has or is on the verge of like early revenues. So product, company, commercialization stage, customers, it's a bit later. We're typically investing 5 to 20 million tickets in rounds starting at 20, and those are small rounds, up to hundreds of millions. So just to give you a sense of where we're coming in. And we're investing across North America, and we've recently launched a fund in the circular innovation space alongside a number of industrial investors like L'Oréal. And so that gives us a very broad understanding of where innovation's coming from and what are the next trends and what are the strategic investors and partners looking for. So we're investing, again, kind of agnostic, so ag tech, energy, and everything related to storage, renewables, green chemistry. We'd be doing, industrial IoT, so pretty broad. We're receiving on a yearly basis. I don't want to discourage you. It's just to give you a sense of what the maths look like, but we're receiving right now 1,200 deals on a yearly basis, and we'll end up doing perhaps 2 to 3 deals. So yeah, it is challenging to reach funding at that stage, but there's a number of investors like us out there. And what's interesting is that we're always investing alongside other investors. And so that's how we ended up investing in some of the deals. And I guess what we're trying to demonstrate here is that it really is a chain, right? And we're all working together, right? Earlier investor building a pipeline, and then the more you grow alongside that chain, you need sometimes to raise funding. And so we've done a number of deals with Anges Québec. At some point, we realized out of all those deals, some of them had great technologies, but the team wasn't ready to raise funding, because it's not strictly about technology. It's a lot about human and demonstrating the capacity to build that and to bring that technology to market. And so that's why we also, and that's my other hat, we founded an accelerator that is also, that is being supported by the Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. So once a startup is on the verge to reach commercialization, I encourage you to go out and meet with those guys, because they're there to help you as well, and try to build a scenario and talk to investors. We've aggregated approximately 30 to 40 investors in the CleanTech space around that accelerator. And those guys are working in the seed fund stream with SDTC and looking at deals with Anges Québec as well. That's one of the investor in the group. So that's the little cycle platform.
Great. So you can see how it kind of takes a village to get all the way to the end. It really is. So I'll just open up the floor for this one. So what do you find are the biggest shifts in mentality that need to happen to go from being an inventor to being an entrepreneur? So you've got an idea and you want to turn to a business. What are some of the things that you need to be processing differently to go in that route?
I think one of the big shifts is to be able to learn to speak with different types of stakeholders, I'll call it. So learn how to sell a product to a client, so really understand the client's need, and know how to speak the client's language, and as well in terms of investors as well. So the investor is not, for example, going to understand a large number of technical details, we'll say, but we'll want to understand what the value proposition is. We'll want to understand if you validated who your client is, and really how you're going to get to your client. So how are you going to sell? So it's a little bit of a shift in mindset, because probably the things that you'll find most relevant or important are not necessarily what the investor will want to hear. So I've had a lot of pitches where I'm just like, well, I won't be able to tell you if what you're saying is smart or not, because I have no idea. It's Greek to me, but I'll want to understand. However, who's your client? How many are there? What do they act like? What's their day-to-day? what pain points do they have, and how do you think you can help them? So it's a lot more of a simpler, down to earth language, but it's a shift I find for a good number of researchers, but something that's definitely surmountable.
I like the way you put things. I like to say that you guys are all really passionate about your molecule. We're not. We're passionate about how that molecule is going to reach market. So it's really about demonstrating that path and the capacity to follow that path. That's of interest for us. If there is a path and that we're confident that we're going to see it happening, then we're going to deep dive into everything that you say. We're going to call all the customers, call people in the market, just to make sure that there's like some scenario where that could exist, because there's very high level of risk at that stage. And so shifting from molecule to a company that's selling a product, that's different.
Big problem.
There's also I think the different accelerators and incubators that can help bridge that, like help learn that language, notably Sic Momentum, that can come in.
So I'm also director of the Engine. I don't know if you had mentioned that, but the Engine Technological Center, Innovation Center at McGill, we teach, like many other organizations, we go through the lean startup process, and one of the sayings there is, don't be in love with the solution, be in love with the problem. And that's one big step for an inventor to become an entrepreneur, is to stop being enamored with the solution that they have produced, which may not fit any market or any need, and to really pay attention to the problem. And that might mean tweaking your solution a lot or a little bit, but it also means, stop thinking a little bit about the solution and think about its applicability. I think that's quite important, actually.
Yeah, I would say that the same, echo what has been said, and it's basically changing from your idea, your innovation, what makes it so good, to how do I reach market, and part of that is also being a little, being humble, because you're gonna learn so much along the way. You're gonna have to be open to learn from different stakeholders, as what has been said. You're gonna have to learn from your investors. You're gonna have to learn basically to speak differently in layman terms, something that everybody can understand, and provide more context. And don't get bogged down by how many questions you're gonna get, because you're gonna get a lot of questions. And just be humble and be prepared to answer those questions, and try to think a little bit long term, not long term as in like 50 years, but something like 5 to 10 years, thinking like, okay, what is it that I need, and how do I get what I need to launch my idea into market.
Yeah, I'll just add, from all the years I've been doing this at McGill, I did product development for 15 years before that. That's my background. And to what you're saying, a technology push is a whole lot harder than a market pull. So you really want to think that way. If you really have no market and you're pushing the tech, that's going to be an uphill challenge, if not impossible. And the other thing I find that is not considered early enough but is learnable like a language is things like, do a back of the envelope on how much this will cost to produce. If you've never done it and you go see an investor and it's like, well, a gram will cost $1 million, you really have nothing. Maybe you have a great publication though, and that's the difference. So I agree. Some of that language is also just thinking of the economics of what you're doing and whether it makes sense. So, all right. So what do you look for when deciding which projects to invest in? So, what makes things stand out, and what are the ones that, like, hey, that's a giant red flag we see and you've just completely overlooked? So from your experience, what do you have to say about that?
I can start if you want. The two main elements at first look at a new proposal is really looking at the innovation and the value prop. So really understanding that there's those basics to actually have a product that brings value that clients want. So really understanding that element, even before looking at the economic models and so on, just looking at like that basic value that you can bring. and the real innovation, so which acts as a barrier to entry as well for competitors, because if it's something that anyone can reproduce, well, that's a little bit less interesting for a venture capital or angel investor. And the other element that we're really looking for is team at the early stage. So we want to see a well-rounded team. So we like to see, obviously the brains, the technology or science people. We want to see also probably like more of a commercial co-founder or someone's in that core team that has maybe brought products to market before and so on. So it doesn't have to be necessarily a big team, and it can be complemented by advisors that are coming in, like, different market advisors that are willing to give you a few hours a quarter or something like that. But at least, being able to see, well, okay, we have maybe a little bit of a gap in the team, but we've come in and filled it in with some strong advisors. Those are really elements that speak a lot, and that really encourage an investor to dig a little bit deeper, get us interested.
So for us, it depends on the funding stream. At the seed fund, we're a little bit more flexible. We want to know if there's an innovation. So for sure, if there's a technological innovation that the company is bringing to the table. Second, sustainability benefits, but it can be very broad. At the seed fund stage, we don't necessarily quantify those impacts, or we don't ask for quantitative benefits. So we're a little bit more flexible on that stage. On the startup and scale-up phase streams, we want, in the innovation front, we want to know what's the IP strategy. It's very important for us to know that the innovation is protected on your IP strategy, and that you have thought about it, and how are you going to go about commercializing it along with the IP strategy. And the environmental benefits were a little bit more strict on the startup and scale-up, so we want to see that it's not just a perception of a sustainability benefit. We want to know that there's actually, in the business as usual scenario, in the absence of this technology, what is going on, what's happening, and what is it that you bring to the table, and the technologies is impacting, and what are the environmental benefits. So we will ask for environmental benefits quantitatively. And then all of those things that Caroline said, so same thing. We want to know, the third party, if there's like a commercialization partner, if there's a strong team and investor strength and all of that stuff. But the two main ones that we look at is the innovation, the environmental benefits, and the value proposition is super important as well. If there's no value proposition, there probably not going to be any environmental benefits, because an idea needs to be deployed not one time, but lots of time to make a real impact.
So in addition to that, we'll be having a portfolio point of view. So that's really what a VC is about. At the end of the day, we need to bring return to our investors. So we would never be able in a VC, like it's very challenging to be a VC that would be targeting strictly CapEx intensive deals. And that's very important to understand. You want to have some kind of balance geographically from a technology point of view as well. And the amount of capital that needs to be deployed is also very important, because if we're not succeeding, it's just no more funds after that. And we also want to have, so for instance, if you're meeting with a VC that's already done a number, let's say, of whatever, biofuel deals, well, first of all, that's rare. That's rare, because it's a challenging space. And they might not end up doing a lot of deals in those sectors, just from, again, a balance, try to balance the portfolio. So that's what's different. IP is a need at our stage, because at the end of the day, there's failures. And if it happens, that's what remains. We're looking for a demonstrated impact on the environment. And I put that in another way of seeing this is, if the company is not able to deploy technology, even though the technology would have a fantastic potential for impact on the environment, it will never happen. So that's no impact whatsoever if it's not deploying. So there's really both of that needs to come together for us to be confident that it's going to happen. And a number of corporates, let's say, that could become the acquirers of those either technology or even company. There's a lot of M&A happening in their sector in the clean tech space. Sometimes IPOs, but we're looking at the exit really, and retro engineering the process that will lead us to that stage. So, yeah.
What kind of return, Catherine, are you looking at as a VC?
Yes. So depends of the
If
stage.
I may ask.
Yes. It depends of the amount. It depends of a lot of things at the end of the day. But really, you want in the VC, you want to bring back, let's say, 2 to 3 to 4x on the fund. 4x is fantastic. But in the clean tech space, if you're targeting for 3x on the fund, like take into account it's 18% IRR. So that's what we're looking for on the fund.
Yeah, so I mean, I think those are good things to have your eyes open to when you go in and not be, be unaware of the fact that there's a return that has to happen here. So, there's lots of students here, so and lots of researchers, which is great. So, what types of relationships should they build outside their academic disciplines if they want to sort of get more involved in the scale-up innovations or get into this ecosystem?
Maybe I can take that one first. Well, I think that you have to build a network. You have to talk to people who have been tech entrepreneurs before you, and you talk to them, and they share their experience. Typically, the tech entrepreneurs like to help others, like people do at Anges Québec, for example. And it's super important to do that because, at McGill now we have a structure, we have those people around. You can do it through the engine, for example, or the Dobson and so on. But I think it's really important because otherwise people are constantly starting from scratch. The discussion we had before this panel is when you go to a business deal, typically you've never done it before. So if you're a new tech entrepreneurs, but there is knowledge out there. And so you have to reach that knowledge by networking.
Agreed.
Yeah, so I think that's a clear one. I know there's lots of courses around entrepreneurship, et cetera. How do you find they actually train people for getting into this space? Do you find it's made a big difference over the last couple of years, that there's more accelerators, more training, et cetera?
Yeah, I think that it gives the entrepreneurs more grounding in terms of the typical business practices. So I feel like they're often a little bit more certain of their direction. Accelerators do a great job of getting entrepreneurs ready to pitch investors as well. So they work a lot on how to present your business investment opportunity as a story. You're really trying to engage your audience, and it's an audience that, as I mentioned before, you're not necessarily used to talking to. So how do I talk to an investor? How do I pitch them? So I think it can definitely be helpful.
Yeah, I think in the seed fund, for example, that we work closely with the accelerators. Every round we see that they're getting better and better at their pitches. Even if we're not talking about the same companies, they have been getting better and better. So I definitely think that it's a good training. I would say it's something that that entrepreneurs should be comfortable is at fundraising. Talking to investors or potential investors. I just was talking to one of my portfolio companies who had to talk to had to do 300 pitches in 6 months. So, I mean, don't be afraid to just refine your pitch and get it better and better. She was able to raise $1.5 million. So that's, it's great.
50 pitches a month. That is, you should get better if you're doing 50 pitches a month.
If I may add, I know we've been tracking some companies for years, like 5 years even. So it's not like a no is not a definitive no. Let's say that maybe you're not at the right stage. Maybe the technology or portfolio's already built in a way that we can't accept some more deals in that space. Maybe there's going to be another, opportunity that's going to come in and a new allocation that would fit the needs. So really keep the discussion open. What I like to say is there's a fan club that you have to build around your technology. If it's too early, don't reach out to a growth stage VC. It's going to take forever, but some earlier stage VCs will track your progress if you're keeping them informed. Obviously, don't harass them on a weekly basis. It's not going to work, but try to keep the conversation open. We all have CRMs, and we're all tracking what's new about those companies, specifically the ones that we're interested in the technology. So, yeah.
So that's good advice about what not to do. I've been to some VC presentations where they gave some great examples of things not to do, given one. So Adriana or Carolyn, anything you would tell people, don't do this because it's not going to resonate very well with us?
I'm just trying to think.
Coachability is important.
One I remember hearing was, we are a CleanTech VC. You have a life science innovation. You sent it to me. Yeah, I know the life science department, and now I'm not sending it to them because you didn't do your homework. If you can't do your homework, why should I do my homework? So I remember hearing that from one investor for sure.
Yeah, I mean, doing your homework for sure. Something that, in the especially if you're making claims on sustainability, just very much research the business as usual, because sometimes we encounter things like they're comparing, for example, a technology, a composting technology, and they're comparing themselves to incineration. But I mean, the incineration rates in Canada are not that high, so it's kind of like, okay, I don't think you did your research well. You need to really understand what is going on in the business as usual in the absence of your technology, for example. So.
Yeah, I think that kind of intellectual honesty or just the transparency that we're looking for. So it's not really like an error that we make at one specific time, but it's more of like an attitude of we don't expect anyone to have the answers to every question. So you can kind of like smell it if someone's BSing an answer, and so it's important to establish the credibility pretty quickly. And if you say you don't have any competitors and we can do a Google search and there are 15 that we found, well, we don't know if we can believe you anymore. So it's better to maybe show us that you've done your homework, and there's no issue necessarily if there's a certain weakness. It's just that we need to talk about how we could maybe mitigate that or improve it. So it's a discussion. It's not about a partnership. So and you have to obviously, like the investors that you're potentially going to be working with as well. But, just so we're very cognizant of the fact that, our angels will be working with you for maybe 5-7 years. So you're building a relationship that's going to be with you for a while. And, if people sense that they're not going to have the type of relationship they're looking for, then they're just going to pull out pretty quickly.
And if I may, we're going to find it anyway. So we're going to conduct due diligence. It's going to take weeks, and we'll find it anyways. So, and if I may, we all have those buttons on our website, drop a business plan. Don't do. That's a trick. Don't do that. We're all over the place, always attending events and stuff. So find a more clever way to meet with us, and meet in person. It's better. Yeah.
This is great advice. And the other great advice is you always have a competitor, which is do nothing. I remember somebody told me I have no competitors. Like, well, you do, which is doing nothing, which I'm going to choose to do now, which is what I did before when I didn't have your invention, and I went along just fine. Yeah. So we'll go to the last question so we can leave some time for audience questions. So what is the top advice you would give students and researchers looking to become entrepreneurs?
top advice to become entrepreneurs. I think you need to root your passion into the impact that you want to make in the world, especially in clean tech. You know, I love clean tech myself. I think this is a game changer. I think it will be for the world. To really, as a researcher and a student, you have to want to have an impact, and that's the driving force to me.
I would say 3 things. So first of all, know your customer, know the pain points of your customer, reach out to your potential customers to understand really what is it that only your technology is able to solve, and also expect them to change their mind, because sometimes they change their mind. So be flexible in what they are telling you and what they might say later. Second thing, build a strong team. Surround yourself with advisors, with people with more experience, because sometimes founders that are very technical and very young, sometimes they need to balance with like the commercialization, finance aspect. So building a strong team is key. And the third thing, I was going to say, I'll get back to you.
Okay.
I really liked what you said, but I was hanging on for the third one. No, I mean, it's really to get out into the world and meet your clients and understand really what their needs are and see, be open-minded about like the project taking different directions, because there's one thing that we refer to often in the startup and investment ecosystem is the pivot. It's it's not necessarily your end business that actually is successful is probably not the one that you started off with. So it's having that open-mindedness about your journey and being open about different ways that you could commercialize your product, or the different types of clients that you could sell them to. It may not be where you expect.
I remembered, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
The third one is perseverance. So persevere. We found out that we did a whole portfolio mapping and analytics, and we found out that it takes about 3 years for a proof of concept technology to get to commercial market launch, so 3 years. And the second thing that we found out is that it takes about 7 years for a company to reach $1 million in revenue. So
That's probably the best advice.
Persevere.
Yes, and be cognizant of the pivot. I've seen a number of companies pivoting and then making much more sense, and the commercialization was much more interesting than it was previously. So that's very important. I think they summarize it quite well.
And I'll add one more P word, which is passion. Being an entrepreneur isn't, I've got a cool title, I get to hang out and go to conferences and see to Montreal. It's actually having a ton of passion, because you're going to have to do a lot of work. You're going to have to live and breathe this. You have to wake up every day trying to say, how do I make it better? Without that, this is not really going to be a sustainable enterprise. So with that, we will now open up the floor to the audience. So you can see there's a microphone right there. So we'd ask that you come up and ask about any of the topics discussed today or your startup experience. And it would be great if you could introduce yourself and let us know what your role and department is here at McGill.
Don't be shy. Any question will do.
Yep.
So guys, self-introduction first. I'm Chen Yang. I'm a first-year PhD student. So I did my bachelor's in computer science and biology. I did my master's in computer science, all at McGill. And I'm doing my PhD in quantitative life sciences. So sort of like a interdisciplinary biology, quantitative methods. And so my question is that during my summer, I worked in like this startup sort of pre-IPO company called Hinge Health. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but they do like musculoskeletal digital healthcare. And I talked to some of the founders there, and they said they've never heard of any academic person, so like a professor, have like a successful startup. And they said it was because when you're a tenured professor, you don't have that drive, because there's always something to fall back on if the company doesn't work. So since we have a lot of students here, Let's say some of us want to go into academia. Do you think it's possible, as let's say as a tenured person, to also have like a successful business on the side? So what do you guys
Do you
think?
have
Have you
an
guys
example?
seen any in your
I do
experience?
have one.
Okay, go for it.
No.
No, I was just going to say, like, I think the reason why they say that is because there's too big of a nice safety net there, and I think that's fine. If that's like the route you want to take, but the investor is really going to be looking, for example, for a team that is dedicated full time. So the founder that wants to keep their tenured job, which is completely understandable, will maybe take like more of a part-time role with the organization. But definitely, if that that person should probably step out of the CEO role anyway if they want to get their company VC funded. So it doesn't mean that the company won't be successful, but really to get the VC funds, we'd look for the dedicated teams.
So one of the company we ended up investing in is called Spark Microsystems. So teacher at UQAM back then that went on, that went on teaching at ETS, and it's an alternative to Bluetooth. So ultra wideband, ultra low wideband. And so we ended up investing in that deal that went through our accelerator. And at some point, Frédéric Napke, who's the teacher that led the tech development, ended up not wanting to manage a payroll, I'm guessing. So that's one of the things you have to do when you're leading a startup. So, and that's just not what the intent was. And so he kind of moved on into a more like CTO position, and it happens often. Is there a lot of startups led by teachers? Not a lot. I'd say probably 50% are either students or teachers coming out of universities. It's the other half is just literally people working in the industry and fighting a challenge they've identified and wanting to find a solution. So it's really 50-50. What I'd love to see is much more tech transfer happening, because we're not seeing the deal flow increasing a lot, and we have numbers from all across North America, so we can compare provinces at least, and so that is, I think, a need. And there's also, I've heard once a rector saying it's probably 10 to 15% of the teachers that have this interest or capacity to do it. So that's already a small number. So after that, you need to be able to find them, sort them. It's a challenge, yes.
I would add to that. Yeah, I have a few examples in mind, but I think that there's a positive side to being a faculty member and being an entrepreneur at the beginning, at least, to start up, because of the very fact that our livelihood doesn't depend on it. We can actually devote some time and effort, and we have the luxury of doing it. And I encourage people to try it and to do it. It doesn't mean, often it means that you won't be CEO of that company. You might be CTO for a while, maybe not for the whole duration of the company, but it's very, it depends what you want to do, but you've launched something, it takes a life of its own, and that's great for society and the community. If you want to remain a professor and continue research, quite doable.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question? Please step up to the mic and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Nick Anjon. I worked for a few years in the energy efficiency sector, and now in my second year of a master's in the mechanical engineering department. I want to circle back to one of Caroline's points, which is that private investors are looking for barriers to entry as a way to protect their investment. So for them, ease of replication is in a way a bug. But if we're looking at the public interest and back to today's topic, the problem of fighting climate change, well, something that we can easily replicate by many different firms, many different actors, is probably something positive for society. So I'm wondering if you have any comments on how universities as a public institution can push forward these types of innovations that are more easily replicable, are not as attractive to at least to early stage investors, but could be useful to society as a whole.
Yeah, if I can take that one, I think. So basically, to me, there's no contradiction between research and publishing research results and starting companies or getting patents, because for you can both publish a result and get a patent for it. The timing is important, but it's quite doable, and it's so. In terms of we do put out there a lot of our algorithms, and we share algorithms in AI, for example. There's a lot of sharing, and that's totally fine, actually, totally fine for the university. If that is the wish of the researcher, absolutely we support it. However, when we look at certain sectors, for example, life science, molecules, we're talking about molecules and things like that. If it is open science, it's pretty difficult to bring to market. And if the end result, the impact to you is that it gets to the patient, for example, it's probably better to protect so that some pharma will invest $1 billion to bring this to market, and it will benefit the whole world. If not, it won't go anywhere. So it's multifaceted. But at a university, we're basically the researchers decide. If the researcher says, I'd like to put this on a shared platform for code, whatever, that's fine. But sometimes you can do that too, and you can say, well, okay, with the shared code that I had for some computer-aided design tool or whatever, you could have a version that is more supported, and you have versions, then that could be protected, or that could be part of a company as well. So you have a public version that is free, and then you have a version more dedicated to what customers would want, to see support and things like that. You could do that too.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the only thing that can be tricky at a university is trade secret. So I worked in the chemical industry. There were lots of trade secrets, but we could keep them secret because we had the infrastructure to do that. At a university where you need to disseminate knowledge, that becomes hard. So those are the only ones I find tricky to do. The others can be managed, as Benoit said. All right, step on up.
Hi, my name's Samson, a recent graduate from mechanical engineering. I was part of Jeff's group and co-founder of a new company called Altiro Energy. And I kind of have a twofold question. One, what advice would you have for a company that is kind of more hard tech and cap intensive at the beginning as opposed to a lot of software companies? And you're saying you're investing more in Series A and B, but the time to get that traction really takes a lot of both time and investment to build up that skill. So how would you kind of bridge that gap?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I know your company, I think we've spoken before. I think you tried to do a pitch in French, and then I realized that you're more English speaking. But it can be a little bit tricky, and it can be a little bit scary sometimes for the investor when you see kind of like the mountain in front of you. I think part of it is breaking it down into milestones that you can achieve, within a maybe 18 to 24 month block. And I think around anything to do with sustainability, there are really a good number of grants that you can get. In Canada, we're very lucky. I spoke with a company just today that had gotten, I don't know how much non-dilutive from STDC, but a few other sources, which surpassed the amount of equity that they'd gotten by quite a bit. So I think, around that piece, we're in a really good geography and time period to get that support to help invest a little bit more on the CapEx side as well.
Yeah, I would say that take advantage of all the incubators. Some of the incubators, I don't know your technology, so I have no idea. But for example, I've discovered lots of good incubators that have facilities that can, quote unquote, rent for companies. So for example, D3, Concordia, they have the bio. There's other examples, Velocity, et cetera. So if there's, there's probably solutions out there, but sometimes the network is a little bit disjointed, so make sure that you research like what is available, because as Caroline mentioned, there's grants, there's facilities you can use. But yeah, it can be daunting if it's a capital-intensive technology. Again, perseverance, what I've seen of that are companies that are in the high capex industries is perseverance, patience, a lot of patience, looking for investors that think like you, that they want to walk with you in your journey at a long term, not like try to exit in 2 or 3 years. So try to find those investors as well.
So Technoclimat,
Yeah.
SDTC. I'm gonna give you really
We work
names,
together, so you
know?
can, yeah.
They work together.
Yeah.
They share deal flow, so that's good.
Yeah.
And if you're based in Quebec, so CCTT, so collège, bref, those are
Centre collégiaux de
the transfer technologique. So those guys have some tech capacity and labs that you can use, because investors will be looking for demo plant if it's a plant that you need to build. And so maximizing non-dilutive. If you do have angel investing, find good ones. Don't break your cap table, because at the end of the day, what the investors aid is coming in, looking at all the name on the cap table, trying to make a bit of place for themselves in there. It can be challenging, it can be taught. And find the investors that are doing those type of deals. There aren't a lot of them out there, unfortunately. So accelerators can help you sort those guys. So meet with them, even though you don't make the cut in the cohort. They can probably at least learn who you are, what you're doing, and still help you at the end of the day. So there's just a limited number of people, and we all know each other. So.
There are also competitions, large competitions for greenhouse gas emissions reduction. X Prizes, Elon Musk. Those are moonshots sometimes, but they have a lot of money actually. And I spoke to a member of the Weston Foundation, just a few days ago. They launched recently, I was not aware of it, a sustainability challenge for growing food in Canada off-season. Like, literally, basically I'm thinking greenhouse gases and everything, greenhouse growing, not gas. And so I think they set aside $33 million for that. And they're looking at maybe 4 winners in the end, each sharing about $8 million. That's quite, so maybe these competitions could be a source of funding to you.
By the way, we'll launch one of those challenges, or keep your eyes open, and then probably during January or somewhere like that, we'll be doing that challenge.
Yeah, just a couple things to add. The CJEPs are a good route, and they don't take IP, so you just use their facilities. And I'll give you 2 examples, because they're companies I know. They're pretty well known. That's Carbicrete and Animera, both McGill spin-offs. So Carbicrete, I got an NSERC eye-to-eye for them when they were still in the lab, so they got $125,000. They were second in the Dobson Cup, and they got a William and Rhea Seath Award. So they got $160,000 or something of non-dilutive funding. That's Carbicrete, and then they got went from there. And Amera got an eye-to-eye as well. I got them one of those, and then they got an early-stage angel investor who really helped kick them off. So they found somebody who was really keen on this kind of a personal thing, and so they have a very limited cap table. It's actually quite impressive how they've done that. But it started with getting as much non-dilutive that was readily in your ecosystem. It's around. Start with that, and free money is always good money. So. I don't know how much time we have. Katja, can we still take some questions? All right, if anyone else has a question.
Hi, Salman Craig, assistant professor at the School of Architecture, one of the co-leads, one of the lead PIs for one of the themes here. I'm not tenured, so I'm still hungry. And young enough to know that I'll see the effects of climate breakdown in the decades to come, and also watch my students experience those, and my daughter experience those. It's been great listening to you. I want to draw more of your sort of personal experiences before you leave. I'd be really interested to hear, which projects you're most proud of, any success stories, and also be very interested to hear if there are any projects where the environmental benefits were clear. But the route to commercialization was not, and so you had the difficult decision to say no, and what happened afterwards.
I've got two different examples. First of all, it's probably Enerchem. It's a massive. They've raised a little more probably than $1 billion, so it's a lot of funding that went into that, but it's pretty fantastic what they're doing, post-consumer, compostable and recyclable waste, urban waste, going through a gasification. They're one of the remaining companies still standing, doing biofuels and different green chemicals, so that's pretty fantastic. They draw the attention of a number of oil and gas players as well. So that, and given the whole story behind that, such a challenging space, a lot of capital needed, but it's fantastic. The technology itself is impressive. And the other interesting company that it went well for us from an investor point of view, but we ended up selling that company, and it's a Agrisoma. So they've developed the IP on a oil seed, so 2 byproducts. One is carbon negative while the plant is growing, plus it's a intercrop. So it's interesting. It's not competing with any food crops whatsoever, and it's a drop-in fuel, so 100% GHG reductions in the biojet fuel. And the other byproduct is a pulp that we're selling to replace canola in Europe, because there's soya. Sorry, there's a limit to the imports that are allowed. So. Again, pretty impressive, and too early, perhaps, because we ended up doing a number of 100% biojet fuel flights from Zurich to LA, and to really long flights, and it didn't pick up when it was there. And we had Qantas involved, and we presented the deal to Air Canada, and still, we draw the attention of food companies that's selling the pulp. We'll see where it goes, and maybe the COSIA, and that's a good example of a technology that was maybe too early. You need to have the industry that's following the path and the legislation in place, and it wasn't there at that time.
I have 2 examples of companies that are actually working together. So one called Equation, and the other one is called Solum. So Equation, they have, both of them are in controlled agriculture, so in greenhouses. Equation has a robot that looks at tomato plants, to give an example, and they are able to estimate the yield better than the farmer, and they are also able to identify pests. So if they see they instead of having somebody going in and trying to find pests, the camera will say this part of the greenhouse is at risk for pests, because they can sense like the humidity is higher, the CO2 levels are higher. So not only visual, but like the climatic conditions. So that's one. And the other one is Solom. They're working together. Actually, Solom provides LED lights, but helped by AI, by artificial intelligence. So they're able to provide the whole spectrum of the lights in the greenhouse. So, mimicking the sun, what the crop needs, whether it's like the blue spectrum, the yellow spectrum, depending if it's a pepper, a tomato, a strawberry, etc. So really increasing the yield in the greenhouses. And now they're working together as part of the ecosystem. The companies to work together, and now they're working together on a solution to bring equations to the solution from 75% pest reduction to 100%, because then Solom could use their UV lights to actually kill the pest. So that'd be great if they can do that. But they're both doing really well. They're, in Canada, there's a lot of government incentive to produce food in greenhouses. So to have food security. So those are great, two great companies. One company that I'm not going to mention the name, but it's a company that we had to off-ramp at the due diligence stage, because they were producing a soy protein, a soy protein, and they were trying to replace meat with that, but it was kind of too early. Their baseline, their business as usual was meat, and we were not. We disagreed with them because they were not actually replacing meat; they're actually replacing another type of soy. So it was a company, a technology that they were not using hexane, for example. So it's not using hazardous material, which is not allowed in Canada anyways. But usually the soy extracts are imported from China, for example. But it was more energy intensive. So at the end of the day, the environmental benefits were not there. They were zero. And again, the perception of sustainability was there. There's less hazardous material going used, but the product was not at a stage that we could say, oh, it's going to replace meat. Not necessarily. So that's a company that maybe needs to advance more on the product stage to be able to really demonstrate what's the value proposition, or what is it that they're actually replacing.
What we're seeing on our end is, there's some amazing technologies that our investors have invested in, from organic semiconductors to polystyrene recycling. That's one we have in common. Even sort of buoys that are placed on the coast for example, near resorts in the Caribbean to desalinate the water, because they're using diesel generators, for example, to desalinate. So they're using kind of like a simple osmosis procedure. So those are all amazing technologies that get you really excited. And I think, the point that you were making a little bit earlier when we were talking, like one of the big challenges is just commercialization and what is the best business model. And that's really, like, I think a lot of the learnings is just, it can take a while to really find that right, like, sales channel, to find the right pricing model, the right revenue model, working with the right distributors, or do you need to sell direct? So there's so many different elements that can vary, and I think that's really one of the big learnings we have as angel investing is really a little bit for the longer haul in a sense, because we're there for 5, 6, 7 years often, maybe 8, 9. Like, it can take a really long time before there's a commercial success, and then the possibility of our angels and the entrepreneurs with them, of course, having a financial success and exit.
Yeah, my two, I mentioned Anamera and Carbicrete, and I was there from the beginning on both, so that's successes. We've never had a failure at McGill, so I can't tell you any. I wish that was true. I was just in a startup that failed, so It was a tough lesson to learn, and I mean, it was all based on subprime mortgage crisis in the US, and that impacts you in Canada. So serendipity, timing, just flat out bad luck. There's nothing you can do about that. But I will steal a line from my friend Mike Sarka at the University of Waterloo, runs a partnerships office. He said, we know 90% of the startups we do are going to fail, but we also know 100% of the people involved will learn. So I think from a university environment, that's a pretty good approach to take as well.
I would add maybe, you mentioned Carbicrete, which originated from the Faculty of Engineering. We held them out at the engine, but also Taiga Motors is really quite from mechanical engineering. It is quite an amazing company. And so they want to revolutionize essentially watercraft and snowmobiles by making them electric. Their products are being sold now. They started selling their products a couple of months ago, and they're ramping up. And they through a SPAC, a reverse merger, they're worth maybe $200 million now, something like that. It's very impressive. They were on our classes when, Jeff? 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 8 years ago? You know, Gabriel, Samuel, and compagnie. Yeah, kudos to them because they're forcing the rest of the market to go that route. And we saw BRP wanting to go to electrify their ski-doos and sea-doos in the next 5 years, they said, I think.
And they beat Carbicrete in the Dobson Cup. They were 1 and 2, so how good is that?
Yeah.
Taiga Motors was first and Carbicrete was second in that round of the Dobson Cup that year. All right, I think at that we will close up. I'd like to have you join me in thanking Catherine, Benoit, Adriana, and Caroline for being such a great panel.